Good afternoon. How's everybody doing today? My name is Dustin Hurst. I am the Vice President here at the Idaho Freedom Foundation, and I'm excited to welcome you to our very first ever in-person session of Legislature 101, our training class, so that citizens are armed to understand and participate in the legislative process. Before we get started today, I want to take care of a few things. As I look around today, it feels nice to be amongst our own people. There's not a single mask in this room. That's fantastic. That's great. Freedom smells good.
Don't wear your freedom filter.
Yeah, exactly. We'll do a couple introductions before we have Kaitlyn come up. Again, I'm Dustin. I'm the Vice President here at IFF. I'm coming up on 7 years with the foundation, and we've done a lot of really good work to keep the Idaho way of life, keep taxes low, to limit government. There's always more to do, as all of you know. That's why you're here today, my guess is. And it's been a pleasure to serve in this capacity. We've got our Legislative Affairs Director, Fred Birnbaum, who is the top mind on the state budget in the entire state. Fred probably knows more about the budget than the governor himself, and he is an asset to our team and to the Liberty Movement here in Idaho. Kaitlyn Shepard is our research assistant. She joined our team. She joined our team straight out of law school, and she's just been killing it since arriving here in September. Was it September? Yeah. And you're going to see a lot of really big stuff from her. We're happy to have her here. Back in the back is Allie Meagle. She is she deserves it too. She is our development person, plus our office manager, plus she puts up with me on a daily basis, and that in and of itself deserves an award, so thank you, Allie. Finally, before we get to Kaitlyn, I see a couple people who are IFF supporters and donors in here. I just want to let you know that I appreciate you, and I appreciate everybody, but the supporters and donors make this stuff possible. It helps us defeat the big business and big government people that we fight on a daily basis. So thank you for making this possible. Our agenda today will go as follows. We're going to hear, Kaitlyn is going to teach us about the legislative process, how a bill becomes law, A to Z, everything about what goes on in this, well, not everything, but most of everything that goes on in this building. And then she'll talk about how to read legislation. She'll be followed by Fred Birnbaum, who is going to add on to that, and he'll also teach how to testify effectively in committee hearings. Then I'll come back up, talk about the Freedom Index and the Spending Index, which are two tools that we have to help you keep track of your lawmakers and hold them accountable. And then finally, if you need it, we'll do a Capitol tour at the end, just so you're familiar with the spaces in this building, so you know where to go when it's time to advocate and show up for important meetings. So, and we'll take questions throughout the presentations. But again, thank you for being here. We appreciate you and your time today on this Saturday. And with that, we'll turn it over to Kaitlyn.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you all today. Like Dustin said, my name is Kaitlyn. I'm a research assistant here with IFF. And today I'm going to be walking us through a little bit more about the legislative process, or the process through which a bill becomes a law that affects our lives here as citizens of Idaho.
You get a little closer to the microphone.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so if you go to the next slide. So I just want to give everyone a brief overview of what we'll be discussing today, so we're all on the same page. So first we'll talk a little bit more about what a bill is and the four main things that a bill can do. After that, we'll talk a little bit about who can introduce a bill and the process of drafting a bill and how it's prepared for first reading and introduction. After that, we'll talk about how the bill is introduced and placed on the first reading calendar. We'll also walk through the Standing Committee's study and report of the bill, followed by a discussion about the second and third reading calendars. After that, we'll talk about the final review process, how the bill is prepared to go to the governor's office, and then the various actions that the governor can take when the bill arrives at his desk. So to help us walk through this, hopefully a little bit more clearly, I'd like to use Senate Bill 1046 as an example. And S 1046 was a bill that was passed last session and created an educational option that's known as an innovation classroom. And innovation classrooms are really cool because they help parents regain more agency over the curriculum that their children are being taught in public schools. So this legislation allows the parents to petition a school to set up an independent classroom within a school district where they have more control over the curriculum that the kids are receiving in school. So before we can really understand this process, it's important to understand what a bill is. So according to the Idaho Legislature, a bill is a proposal for the enactment, amendment, or repeal of an existing law or for the appropriation of public money. So that definition gives us a clue that there are four main things that a bill can do. First, it can create or enact a new law. It can also change or amend a law, eliminate or repeal a law, or it can set aside money for a particular purpose or use. So if you've ever heard the term appropriation in a news article, that's just what they're talking about, the legislator setting aside money for a particular use. So all bills start as an idea, and this idea can come from anywhere. You could have an idea for a bill, a state agency could have an idea, the legislator themselves could have an idea, and although anyone can have an idea for a bill, the actual bill has to be introduced by a member of the legislature. And so what this chart shows is that as the legislative session goes on, it becomes more restrictive about who can introduce a bill. So starting at the beginning of the session on day 1, a bill can be introduced by any member, a group of members, or a committee. Starting with day 12 in the Senate and day 20 in the House, bills can only be introduced by committee. And then by day 36, there are only a few select committees that are able to introduce a bill at that point. In the House, that's State Affairs, Appropriations, Education, Revenue and Taxation, Health and Welfare, and Ways and Means. And in the Senate, it's State Affairs, Finance, and Judiciary and Rules. And so the effect of this is that towards the beginning of the session, there will be a lot more bills introduced. And as the session goes on, there will be fewer and fewer bills introduced. A bill can start in either the House or the Senate, but a revenue bill must start in the House. So after someone has had an idea for a bill, the bill is then drafted. At this point, it's given what's called an RS number, which stands for routing slip, and this indicates that the bill is a draft. At this point, the bill is not publicly available, and it's considered the property of the individual legislator. After the bill is given an RS number, it's sent to a very brief print hearing. And this is just a very brief meeting of a committee deciding whether or not to send the bill on to the next stage of the process. So usually the bill sponsor will get up before the committee and explain briefly about what the bill does, the intended purpose of the bill, and answer questions from his fellow committee members if they have any questions. If the committee votes not to print the bill, it'll die in committee, and that will be the end of its life cycle. But usually the committee will vote to print, and if they do, then the bill is given an official bill number by Legislative Services. At this point, the bill has become public. You can get a copy of it online, or you can come down here and grab a copy of it. For House bills, you'll see it's preceded with an H and then 3 digits after it. And for the Senate bills, you'll see an S with 4 digits behind it. So what's on the screen now is a copy of the Senate Education Committee agenda for January the 28th. And highlighted in yellow is RS 28338, and this is our bill for innovation classrooms before it was assigned its official bill number. So on January the 28th, it was given a print hearing in the Senate Education Committee, and it was presented by Chairman Thane. After this point, it's sent out of the print hearing successfully, given its official bill number. It goes to the floor for introduction and first reading. So at this point, the bill is read on the floor of the particular chamber of origin. Generally, this is really brief. They can choose to read the bill in its entirety word for word, but oftentimes this process is suspended, and they'll choose to read the bill over the desk just by number, committee, assignment, and title only. And then after being read, the bill will be referred to a standing committee for further study. On the screen is a copy of the Senate Journal from January the 29th, showing that the bill was read for the first time and then referred to Judiciary and Rules Committee for printing. And on the next slide, we actually have a brief video of this process.
In the Senate, Bill 1046 by Education Committee, an act relating to education to establish provisions regarding innovation classrooms.
Senate Bills 1044, 1045, and 1046 will be referred to the Judiciary and Rules Committee for printing.
School students.
So this is a copy of the Senate Journal from February 1st, basically just showing that after the bill was read and referred to the Judiciary and Rules Committee for printing, they reported back that the bill was correctly printed, and then it was referred to the Senate Education Committee for study and public comment. So during this stage of the process, the committee is studying the scope and impact of the bill, gathering more information about it so they can make a decision about whether to send it on to the next stage of the process. They may also ask questions to the bill sponsor, take public comment. If the bill is not reported out of committee, it's considered dead and it won't continue on through the legislative process. So this is a copy of the minutes from the Senate Education Committee meeting. This was held on February the 10th, showing that Senate Bill 1046 was studied in the Education Committee. The first thing that they did was take testimony for and against the bill. So first they had a couple individuals come and express support for the bill, essentially arguing that this bill is a really great option for expanding authority of parents and helping them be more in touch with the school and the material that their children are learning. After that, they took some testimony in opposition to the bill, essentially to the effect that there are already a lot of options in the law that give parents similar powers, and so it wasn't necessary to pass this particular bill. After the public comment period, there was some discussion. Chairman Thane answered some questions that his fellow legislators had about the bill, and eventually they voted to send it out of committee to be amended. So here's a copy of the journal from February the 25th, showing that after the bill went through the amendment process, went through the first reading again, and then it was read on the second reading calendar again at length and filed for the third reading. So at third reading, the bill is going to be read again on the floor in its entirety, unless this rule is suspended. If there's any one person that objects to suspending this rule, then they'll read the bill word for word in its entirety. Normally, I don't believe that's the case. After the bill is read, there will be a debate on the bill. So the floor sponsor will get up, give some reasons for supporting his bill, and then the floor will be open to further debate for anyone that wants to express opinions for or against the bill. After the debate is finished, the floor sponsor will close the debate, and at that point, the chamber will take a vote. All that the bill needs to pass on to the second chamber is a simple majority, so just over half of the legislators need to support the bill, and if that happens, then the bill will be sent to the other chamber, either the House or the Senate, where it will repeat the process of going through first reading, committee study, second and third reading. And so here is a copy of the actual bill that was passed into law, just showing that Senate Bill 1046 was actually amended 2 times before it was eventually passed into law. And so when a bill has to go through the amendment process, it actually has to restart the process all over again with first reading. The only exception to this is that they don't do another full committee study and hearing of the bill, but it does have to start over with a first reading and be read 3 times again before it can be passed. So after both chambers have passed the exact same version of the bill comes back to the Chamber of Origin, and it goes through the enrollment process, which just means they check it over for any mistakes, and there's certain leadership in both the House and the Senate that have to sign the bill, and after that, it is transmitted over to the governor's office. So when the governor receives a bill, he has 3 options that he can take with regards to the bill. So the first thing he can do is sign the bill. Usually he has a period of 5 days, not including Sundays, within which to sign the bill. If the governor chooses to sign the bill, it will become law. The governor can also choose to do nothing with regard to the bill. The governor might do this if he doesn't particularly like the bill, but he doesn't dislike it enough to veto it. If he just doesn't do anything within the time period, the bill will go into law without his signature. And the third option that the governor has, if he really dislikes the bill, is he can veto it and prevent it from becoming law. At this point, the bill still has a chance to become a law, but it's going to be a lot harder. It'll need 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate to override the governor's veto. But if they can get 2/3 vote in both chambers, the bill will still become a law. One helpful thing to note, I think, is if you go to the governor's website, there's a tab that says legislative sessions on it, and you can see a list of all the bills that the governor has considered during the session, whether he signed them, whether he vetoed them, and often he might issue a statement saying his reasons for supporting the bill or his reasons for vetoing the bill. Just gives you a clearer picture of where the bill is in its life cycle. And so our bill, Senate Bill 1046, was delivered to the governor about 9 o'clock on May the 5th, and it was signed the same day. So after the bill is signed into law, it's first added to what's known as the session laws. And this is just a compilation of all the laws that were passed during that session. They're in order based on when they were signed into law, and they are effective in July. Eventually, the session laws will be added to the Idaho Code, which is a compilation of all the laws ever passed for the state of Idaho that are in effect, and it's organized more by topic. So eventually, Senate Bill 1046 will be added to the code under the education section. And that's all I have, so I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any. Go ahead, ma'am.
So you had appropriate time, like if he does nothing, is that like a week, a month, a year?
Yeah, so the question is what is meant by the phrase appropriate time that the governor has to act. So normally it's 5 days. He has a period of 5 days to act. If the legislature has adjourned at the end of the session and they're not planning on coming back, the governor has 10 days to sign it, but the general rule is 5.
So it is true that the Senate can refuse to hear any bill from the House? That doesn't seem good. So I read somewhere that the Senate can deny any bill that comes from the House, and they don't even have to review it.
Yeah, so the question is, if the Senate receives a bill from the House, can they just refuse to hear that? And I do believe that's correct.
And vice versa.
And vice versa, it also works the other way.
What happens if the other chamber alters the bill in and of itself, and the wording and so forth? Does it have to then go back to the original chamber where it was passed, and they have to repass it as amended?
So the question was, what happens if the bill is amended? At that point, what does it have to repeat the process? And the answer to that is yes. So both chambers have to pass the exact same version of the bill. So if this bill, so for example, Senate Bill 1046, it's gone all the way through the Senate. If the House has an issue with it, they want to make even adding a comma, adding a couple words, if they make any changes to it, it has to go back to the Senate, and the Senate will essentially form itself into one big committee to talk about the amendments, and then they'll take a vote on the amendments. And it'll keep going through the process again. So after it's been amended, it'll go in the Senate, first reading, second reading, third reading, and then they'll vote on it and send it back to the House.
Question. When is a law determined to
So the question is, when does a law go into effect? I believe it's July 1st.
Standard every summer.
Yes, I think so.
If someone puts forth a bill that's, say, 200 pages long, and they try to hide a bunch of different things in it at one time, so someone objects, it has to be read, the whole thing has to be read. Is that the case?
So the question is, if there's a really long bill and there's provisions in it that that legislators are finding objectionable, do they have to read the bill in its entirety, word for word? And I would say that that's the case. Usually when it's more, if it's non-controversial, they'll usually suspend the rule and just read it by title. You know, everyone's pretty good with the provisions. They kind of know what's in it already. But the ones that are really super controversial and people are having an issue with particular provisions probably will be read in entirety.
Has that happened here in Idaho?
I don't know. This is my first session, but Fred is saying yes. So
Why only once a year do bills, laws go into effect? Why July?
Start of our fiscal year.
yes, yeah. So the reason is because it starts the fiscal year. Go ahead, sir, with the hat.
So what are the options for a citizen to bring forward a bill?
So if you have an idea for a bill as a citizen, I would say it's probably important to have a good relationship with your particular legislators. If you know your legislator, go ahead and reach out to them, send an email or a phone call, ask them if they have time to discuss your idea. You could also, if you have a particular bill, say you had an idea for an education bill, you might reach out to senators or representatives that you know sit on the education committee. Might be a good place to start. Ma'am?
And along with that question, how else can we as citizens participate in this whole process?
So the question is, like, if other than having an idea for a bill, how can you as citizens be involved in the process? I definitely think it's important to have a relationship with your legislators. You could call them and ask them to support or oppose a bill. You could work with groups that are looking at passing legislation. You could also, if there's a bill that you're particularly interested in, anyone can come down and give public testimony in support or opposition of that. You're given like 2 to 3 minutes to come down to the committee meeting and voice support for a bill. I think that's important for the legislators to hear where their constituents are standing on a particular issue.
I think many of us are concerned about and hear that bills are put in the drawer and they never see the daylight. Can you talk about some of the perception of committees being biased, not wanting to hear certain legislators' bills, and they just get stuck in this drawer? And that's kind of a rumor out there. Is there a reality to that? And if so, how do we combat that?
Do you want me to take this one?
Yeah.
Okay, you asked perception, and she's a very well-spoken attorney. I'll tell you the unvarnished truth. Chairmen are the worst, right? That absolutely happens. It happens a lot in the Senate where you'll get a lot of conservative legislation passed over here in the House, or I guess I should say over there in the House. And then the senators just refuse to hear it. Now, this has worked to the advantage of limited government folks in the past. So, for example, in 2012, I remember 2011, I don't remember which year exactly, but Representative Janice McGeehan, who is now our lieutenant governor, she decided to draw Medicaid expansion and the Obamacare exchange. She said, I'm health and welfare chairman, I won't hear it at all. But usually that's not what happens. We've seen efforts to repeal the state's grocery tax. Can't get it into the House Revenue and Taxation Committee because the chairman won't hear it, usually at the request of leadership. So that absolutely does happen. There are ways around that using procedural rules of the House, but we've never actually seen it done. So to be quite candid about it, if you hate that process, if you hate bad people or bad actors drawing bills, get rid of the bad actors.
readings, like the second and third reading, be done in the same day? Particularly like toward the end of the session where they've gone through several changes and stuff?
Dustin
Do they go
is,
that fast?
Okay, this is the only time I will ever have a leg up on a law student. It's because I've been doing this for a while. So let me take you back to, was it 2015, Fred, with the House Bill 312? So the question was, can all of these readings be done on the same day? The answer is absolutely yes. In fact, they can be done in 10 minutes. And the funny thing is, the power players in this building will use that excuse to people who don't understand it. They'll say, oh, well, it has to go through committee hearings. We just don't have enough time to hear it. If they want a bill, they will hear a bill. And I'll give you an example. It was the end of the 15 or 16 legislative session, and they were working on transportation funding. The last time we had a real big tax increase, it was a fuel tax increase. And the bill went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It ended up in conference committee between the two bodies. They had to come together and negotiate a compromise. Anyway, it ended up on the floor, last day of the session. They actually went through the orders. They had a Senate Transportation Committee meeting on the floor of the Senate at 11:30 at night to pass the bill. If they want a bill, they will get a bill. And that happens, that was very unusual, but toward the end of the session, especially when there are no committee meetings, they'll move through the orders up and down all day, and they can move very, very quickly. And my guess is with the special session coming on Monday, you'll see a lot of that. You're going to see a lot of monkey business. You're going to see a lot of jumping around, and that's very, very tricky because the website doesn't automatically update that stuff, so you have to be watching. That's one reason we're here. That's what we try to do, but it absolutely can and does happen.
So one question. So, bills are passed fast. The slower bills, you go on the website and track them. How do constituents find out how that stuff is happening? That they're going to pass bills overnight? How do we become aware of it?
There's this group called the Idaho Freedom Foundation. But even we don't keep up with it because of how the computer updates. You just have to watch the process, be in contact with groups, be in contact with your legislators. For example, Heather Scott is fantastic about updating people on the process of the legislature or the progress of legislation. Tammy Nichols, it's a very piecemeal process. There's no one central place that you can go to look as they're doing it in real time. I wish we had something like that, and maybe I'll see if we can build something like that. But it's very difficult. Right back there.
Yeah, so we're in a district that all three of our representatives are receiving a F.
So wait, are you declaring for office then? That's what I'm hearing.
In any case, they all get an F. Can we appeal to legislators in other districts other than our own?
Yes, absolutely. They will ignore you. They won't ignore you. Sometimes. Yes, you should, and especially if you are well versed in a particular area. So, for example, if you're an educator, they particularly in that arena they listen to educators. If you know transportation policy for whatever reason, or if you know whatever, especially work with the germane committees, meaning the committee that knows about that issue, that deals with that issue. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. Yes, you've been raising your hand for a while.
Is there a certain format you have to follow for writing a bill?
And this is where the law student comes in. We will get to that in just a few minutes. Okay? Other questions about this?
So if I'm a legislator and I submit a bill and it dies in committee or whatever, can I just turn around and submit it again next session? I mean, is there any limit?
You can actually submit it again the same session if you change at least one word in it. But yes, and a lot of times what you'll see is, for whatever reason, especially toward the end of the session, but legislators will introduce bills just to have them in the record, just to show people that this is one idea. So Representative Jason Monks had a bill to eliminate the income tax, Fred? Eliminate one tax and raise up another tax, basically, or property tax, whatever it was. Anyway, but that happens all the time. Absolutely happens all the time. And I will say too, just in that same note, if a bill is killed by a committee, it can come back. It can absolutely come back. So usually the motion is, hold the bill in committee to kill it, right? But we've seen the best one. Oh my gosh. A couple years ago, Representative Tom Lurcher, there was a bill to, it was actually a resolution, and he drawered it. It was Diaper Need Awareness Resolution. So it was about families and old people who need diapers, and we need to find resources for. It was very strange, right? Like it was weird. So he killed it, and then he brought it back, and then because of that one, they passed the state salamander, the Idaho giant salamander, because Lurcher said if we can talk about diapers for adults and babies, we can have a state salamander. It was very strange, but those are two bills that died and came back to life, and that will happen a lot, actually. There. So they can monkey around with the effective dates of bills, and Fred's actually the guy on that one, so I'll let him speak to that.
Hi, good afternoon. So the reason, there's been a few questions. If no language is put into the bill, it goes into effect July 1, that's the beginning of the fiscal year. But frequently, there'll be an emergency clause, and it can go into effect immediately. So it's entirely possible, if there was a good bill restricting vaccine mandates, there could be an emergency clause, so then immediately, now, it has to be signed by the governor, or it has to be an override process, so it's not just because there's a vote on the floor. But as soon as it went through the process, so they can pick a date, they cannot pick a date, and it's July 1, because it's the beginning of fiscal year, or they can say immediately. So those options exist. So this is a question about combining bills. So unlike the U.S. Congress, which does that all the time, Idaho does have a single subject requirement, but that doesn't mean it can't be very complex. So you can combine different tax elements in a tax bill, but you couldn't say combine raising the smoking age with the bill on cutting property taxes. You couldn't do that. And the Congress, they have these omnibus bills, which is very bad, because what you do then is you get everyone to support it by giving everybody something, and the totality is terrible, even if there may be a few good elements. So they push the envelope on the single subject, but compared to the U.S. Congress, most bills are much cleaner from a subject matter perspective. Well, so just briefly, the reason people have heard there's 29 bills are on an agenda, House agenda, and there's believed to be 4 Senate bills. So that was how the process was described to the members by the leadership. Submit your bills by last Wednesday, and they'll be put on an agenda. And so to answer your question, I think it becomes difficult, because then you have overlapping, competing ideas. And some of them will be given a hearing, some might not. But it does make it hard for the average citizen, because, as Kaitlyn explained, they're now RSs. So they're private unless someone wants to share it with you. And we haven't seen all of them, we've seen some of them. So all of a sudden, all these bills show up, and you have to read, absorb, digest, figure it out. And that's a challenge. I'll answer that. So it's the rule. So basically, it's not called a bill. It starts as a draft, and actually, any one of you could get a slip from a legislator to work with drafters, and do a draft. And then once the draft is approved, it gets what's called an RS, a routing slip. And then you have to get the permission of the chair to do that introductory hearing. So when you hear about bills being drawered, there are a complex set of rules. So of course there's the US Constitution, the state constitution, statutes. Everyone's heard of those. But then there are House and Senate rules. And then there's this book about that they're called Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure. And the bottom line is these legislatures, the way they work in most states, and not everyone follows Mason's, the chairman of both the House and Senate are given a lot of power. And in the Senate rules, it actually says that the decision of a chairman is not appealable. So if the chairman, and this has happened, they do a voice vote. I'm sitting right where you are. And it's clear that the ayes had it. Chairman says the nays had it. And everyone's like, what? And he says, that's it. And someone will object, it's too late. Now that's why you would do a roll call. Now I'm not saying, I'm talking about a close vote, not when it's like 10-1 or something. But the point is the chairs do have a lot of power. And I think in this state, they've probably been given more. There are ways to bypass that, or not to bypass it, but the majority of the committee can overrule a chairman. And the culture in this state is that that isn't done. It's happened once or twice. It's been tried a few times, and it usually fails. And part of that is because members think, well, when I'm chairman, I don't want anyone to challenge me, so I won't challenge the chairman now. But the problem with that is it allows one person to essentially stymie public debate on an issue. If one person, meaning the chair of a committee like Health and Welfare, will not hear a bill that, say, would modify Medicaid, then it just won't get heard. And unless there's a hue and cry, a very big one, where you had tons of people show up and pressure everybody, then the chairman or chairwoman, the chair, would feel maybe, well, this isn't a good thing. We're going to have a hearing on this bill. So that's one of the reasons why it is so important. Most people, there's over 500 bills introduced. How many here can say they've read 10% of the bills that were introduced last session? 10%. That's 50. Not all of them. Okay, I see one or two hesitant hands. So there you go. I mean, it's especially if you work full time and you have kids and you have the lawn to cut. It's hard to do.
Are citizens encouraged, like with important bills that are coming up, because we have a few F people that are sitting in chairman positions? I mean, is that a good time for citizens to be showing up for these bills? And can they, at the time of the bill or the chairman sitting in front of them, talk about it and object? Or
So this is a question about chairmen who might be hesitant to have a bill on the calendar. So I'll just give a quick example, and we probably need to move on to the next segment. So let's say there is a bill that's passed by the House and the Senate chairman, and it can go both ways, just to be clear, whoever asked that. They both have the same reciprocal power. So the Senate chairman doesn't want to hear it. If you're a constituent of that Senate chairman, you absolutely, the phone numbers are public. There's a legislative website. Just Google Idaho Legislature and you'll see it. Most of you probably have. And you can call the chairman, the secretary, and ask to meet with them. You may or may not get through. You can leave a message, send emails, but absolutely, if you're in the district or not, obviously if you're in the district, you're a direct constituent. But if I'm here to tell you, if 1,000 people send emails, hear a bill, that would count a lot more than if nobody did. And in some cases, they will resist tremendous pressure because the leadership has made it clear, we gave you this job, and this is important to us, now listen to us. So. Okay. Are you getting to wrap up, or?
Yeah, me again. Okay, so those are really great questions. Thank you all for participating. That's really awesome. So now that we know kind of a little bit more about the legislative process, we're going to move on and talk more about how to read a bill, what a bill looks like, and how to walk through some important aspects of the legislature's website. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go to the legislature's website. You can do that just by searching for Idaho Legislature on Google. It should be one of the first things that comes up. Or you can type in legislature.idaho.gov. And when you do that, you'll see a web page that looks like something like this. You'll see a lot of important information if you want to know more about a certain committee or about everything basically about the legislative process. So to find a bill, you're going to want to click on the box that says legislative sessions. And when you do that, you'll be brought to a web page that looks something like this. It'll come up with the most recent session, but you can also filter it if you're interested in a bill from 2019, 2018. You can do that. You'll see a lot of helpful information on this page. The Bill Center is where you're going to want to go for bills, but you can also see the session laws, key actions taken during that term, agendas, minutes, rules for both houses. But for our purposes, you're going to want to click on Bill Center, and there's a couple ways to filter the bill. If you know the bill number, that's the easiest way. You can just click on legislation by bill number, and it has all the hyperlinks. You can easily find the bill that way. But if you're not sure what the number is, you can also click right below that on legislation by subject or topic. For example, if you knew your bill has something to do with transportation or education, they'll be listed by topic, and hopefully that will get you going in the right direction to find the bill that you're interested in. You can just go to the next one. So for this, I'd like to use one example to kind of help illustrate a little bit better. So we're going to look at House Bill 77, and this is a bill that was considered during the previous session, 2021, and would have established what's known as a free-range kids law. And what these laws are designed to do is essentially amending the definition of what's considered neglect. So this empowers parents because if a parent is choosing to give their child levels of independence, they want their kid to learn how to walk to and from school by themselves. They send their kid to the grocery store around the corner to pick up some milk, or they're playing outside by themselves independently. It just amends the law so that certain reasonable activities like that aren't considered neglect on behalf of parents. Parents are not going to get in trouble with CPS or anything for allowing their kids to exercise some independence. So if you click on that page, you click on Bill Text. It'll bring up the text of the bill. So there's a lot of important things to cover here. So the first thing highlighted in yellow that you'll see at the top of the bill is the number of the legislature that is considering the bill, and then the session in which it was considered. So for us, it's the 66th legislature and the first regular session for 2021. Under that, you'll see which chamber the bill is originating in, the House or the Senate. So ours says in the House of Representatives. Under that, you'll see just the bill number, House Bill 77. Below that, you'll see the committee that introduced the bill. So for us, it's the Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee. You can go back to that for a sec. And then below the committee will be the title of the bill. So ours says an act relating to child protection. Basically, it's just a description of what the bill is designed to do, revising the definition of neglect. And then the enacting clause is required by the Constitution, and it just says be enacted by the legislature of the state of Idaho. On the left, you'll see line numbers. These can be really helpful for a senator or a representative if they have a particular concern for the bill sponsor and they want to direct the attention to a particular line, or also for all of you, if you're interested in a particular part of the bill, you can reference it by line number. And so here is the meat of this bill, why it's really important. And you'll see a lot of language at the bottom of the screen that's underscored or underlined. And this is how you can tell that a bill is adding something to the existing code. So in our case, this is adding some language to the definition of neglect, providing that any child who is of sufficient age and maturity to avoid harm or the unreasonable risk of harm by virtue of engaging in certain independent activities, which includes traveling to and from school, traveling to and from a nearby commercial facility, engaging in outdoor play, remaining at home unattended for a reasonable amount of time, remaining in a vehicle if the temperature is not too hot or cold, or engaging in other independent activities. So all of that language that I just read was just added to the proposed to be added to the existing code. So if you go back to the homepage for House Bill 77, below where the bill text is, you'll see another important document, and that's called the Statement of Purpose and Fiscal Note. So if we click on that, it'll bring us to a separate document. The first thing you'll see is the Statement of Purpose, and this is just a plain language description describing what the bill is intended to do. Below that is the Fiscal Note, which describes the financial impact that the bill will have for the state if it's passed into law. In this case, there was no projected impact on the state because there wasn't any resources that needed to be allocated in reference to the bill. And the sponsor actually speculated that it might free up some resources because we're not investigating as many parents for cases of supposed neglect. And there was also no projected impact on any local entities, cities, or anything like that, because there wasn't any resources that needed to be allocated. And the final thing you'll see on this document is the contact of the sponsor of the bill. If you'd like to get in contact with them, ask them more questions about the bill, there will be a phone number there for you to call. So I also want to give you an example of a bill that is proposing to repeal language from the existing laws. So this is House Bill 337. It's a bill from 2020 that was proposed. Ultimately, this didn't pass, but it would have dealt with minimum wage laws. And so at the very bottom of the screen, you'll see there's a couple of lines of the law that have been strike through or crossed out. And this is how you can tell that a bill is proposing to delete or repeal language from the code. And so this bill was proposing to eliminate language that would have prevented a political subdivision or like a city from enacting a minimum wage that's higher than the state minimum wage. And finally, I want to also give you an example of a bill that, how to tell if a bill is adding an entirely new section to the code. So this is House Bill 88 from the 2021 session. Ultimately, it did not pass, but if you look at the bill, you'll see there's no underlines, there's no strike through, it's really blank when you look at it. But you'll see in section 1, there's some language stating that it's amending the law by the addition of an entirely new section. And so that's how you'll be able to tell that the bill is proposing to add an entirely new section or to the existing code. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions about this.
Is it a requirement for them to have a fiscal note on each one?
So the question is whether the fiscal note is required for each bill, and I believe that is the case. So the question is whether do you mean the fiscal note or just the bill? Okay, so the question is if there's a law that's adding a new section to the code, whether it's required to be published in like a newspaper or something like that. I'm not sure about that, but I do know that it will definitely be published on the website for sure. But I don't think there's any requirement that I know of that it's in a newspaper or the news.
So if we want to propose a bill this session, if we fail to get it in this session, are we doomed until next year?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, unfortunately.
So going back a little bit to the other.
Sure.
At what point or are bills reviewed for constitutionality, either state or federal?
So I think that will be, the question was whether the bills are reviewed to determine whether they violate the Idaho Constitution or the federal Constitution. And I think that would be something that would be covered in the committee hearing. Hopefully the legislators will bring that up, ask questions about the bill. I could anticipate them maybe gathering research to that effect or bringing in experts to testify for or against the bill on that question. So that would be probably where that would come up.
When is the legislative session? I might be stupid because I don't know that, but when is it? Like, what does it go from January to, what is it from?
Second Monday in January until it's done.
So the question is like generally when does the session start? I've been informed that it's the second Monday in January and it usually goes a couple months, but just basically until they've exhausted all the business that they have before them to cover. So it could vary in length depending on how many bills and everything that's brought up during the session.
When they get printed, is there a vetting conflicts between laws that are on the books and how this new legislation would maybe contradict something that's already there? How's that?
I think Fred would like to answer your question.
Again, when a bill is drafted, it's done by legislative drafters. So you could bring your idea. You could actually write a bill if you knew how, or at least sketch it out. And then the legislative drafters, so in this building, they're employed and they have expertise areas. So one young lady does medical policy. Someone else might do tax policy. So they have to insert the new proposed bill into code. And they would tell you that there's potentially a conflict, but here's the thing, you can strike the old language, right? So as Kaitlyn pointed out, if you're replacing something, then that would be part of the bill draft, that the language that existed that conflicted with what you're proposing would be struck. So that's that's part of what the bill drafters do. And for the most part, there aren't too many problems. On the constitutionality, obviously, the way our system works, Joe Biden thinks everything's constitutional, but ultimately, yes, the committee and the body should not pass something that's not constitutional, but then that's what the legal process does. It can challenge it. So there's not really a cut and dried because, clearly people in this state have passed legislation that other people feel is not constitutional and they challenge it. But generally, the drafter and the people sponsoring it should have a view as to whether it's constitutional.
Two questions. The first one is, who makes the final call on when the legislative session ends? How's that determined? And then I have another question.
So the body has to make the call. So they have a schedule that they work to. They shoot for a target. It's, as was said earlier by Kaitlyn, the second Monday in January. So some states like Utah actually say 45 days. Of course, Sundays don't count, things like that. But it's when the business is done, and then there'll be a motion to adjourn, sine die, and then the other body would follow. One typically does it before the other, and it just depends. But let's just say the leadership wants to leave and the members don't. Well, if the motion fails, then they don't go home. And actually this session, it's the longest ever, they did not adjourn sine die, they recessed. So technically they're still in session, although the Senate said they adjourned sine die. It's never really been challenged. Could they do that without the House also agreeing? Most people think no. So that's when they come back Monday, it's actually not quote unquote a special session. It's just special since it's unusual. It's really they're reconvening. And they could stay here till Christmas if they wanted to. But the thinking is they'll tackle the vaccine issue and then adjourn sine die. And that means they can't come back unless the governor called them into special session between now and next January.
And what's the percentage of the vote on that? A simple majority?
Yes.
Say we're leaving?
Yes, the majority of both bodies separately. So a majority of those present as long as there's a quorum. So if there's 70 members and for whatever reason 50 are gone, then they can't. But if you have a majority of the members there, a majority of the members present. So you could have 5 members, 10 members away for whatever reason, and the majority of those present adjourn sine die, then they're adjourned.
And then I was wondering, could you expect to see a lot of lobbyists present lobbying for, like the hospital associations, are they going to be there?
Are you talking about for next week? Is that the question, lobby? So and we probably do need to move on. But, you know, we're registered as lobbyists because the law is very broad. If you attempt to influence legislation or even build relationships. So, you know, we're kind of different because we're trying to get them to do less stuff, and most lobbyists want more. But there are more lobbyists registered than there are lawmakers. I mean, it's a living, it's a career for some people. Of course, the Hospital Association is a very, very big outfit. And the term lobbyists, actually, I think it was the Civil War era, right after the Civil War, where there's a famous hotel in D.C., the Willard, and I don't know what president was, Grant or one of them, but he kept talking about all these people waiting in the lobby to see him. So that's where the term, and that's kind of what happens is you see people sitting all around waiting to see people. So it's actually a very good description of what they do. One more question.
Okay, this is so your area. Are the budget impacts subjective or objective?
Are the budget impacts, you're talking about the fiscal notes. So they're supposed to be rigorous, but I mean, if you are a true financial analyst, they're supposed to provide their best effort at making an estimate. But I'm here to tell you very quickly. So Congress has a congressional budget office, all these smart people with advanced degrees who made all these predictions about deficits and how Obamacare would cost this or wouldn't cost that or Medicaid. And they were all wrong anyway. So I think sometimes someone on the back of a napkin can do a better fiscal note because it all depends on your assumptions. It's supposed to be a reasonably accurate note that says what is the impact of state and local governments of this proposed change. So if it's a tax cut, how much is the cut? If it's an increase, but it's not easy to get that right. Some things are really easy. If you repeal a provision and you know how much money it raises, you can say that's how much money is going to be given back, right? But even when you cut income taxes, there are all sorts of other pieces and parts moving. So I think we'll probably move on. Let's have a hand for Kaitlyn. I think she did a great job. She really pulled together a lot of great research. I don't think I had the patience to go through all of that. So I'm going to try to fill in some of the other pieces, and I'll try to move quickly. Dustin, are you the slide enabler? You don't have any slides. How about the talking points I gave you? I need those. He thinks I'm going to memorize everything and that other information. I didn't make any slides, but I gave them. So a couple things while he's pulling this up as it relates to legislation. And Kaitlyn was going through the House and the Senate, and she was highlighting bills. Couple things to remember in reading a bill. If a bill, as she pointed out, if you're adding language, it has underlines. If it's being removed, there's strike-throughs. But when a bill is amended, it's tricky because the amendment isn't something that's done in committee. The amendment is the committee will send the bill to the amending order, right? So if it's the House Education Committee, they like the bill, but they need to fix it. They actually don't fix it. The sponsor can say, okay, hold the bill, I'll come up with a new one. But then you got to start all over. So often they'll send the bill in the Senate. It's called the 14th order. I think I've got that right. General orders in the House. And then it sort of goes into this holding period. And then they will meet as an entire committee, the committee of the whole, and they will consider amendments to the bill. But the amendments are not visible to the public. So there they all kind of get this packet, if you will, of amendments, and they vote on which amendments, or if one, none, they can't add conflicting amendments, so that they can't conflict, but they could be multiple ones. So then that body can adopt those amendments, and until those amendments are adopted by the originating body, very confusing, they're actually not in the bill. So what that means is when you're trying to read the bill, you've got to almost print it out, look at the amendments separate from the bill and say, okay, how do these fit in? So that is tricky. Once they're approved, they're engrossed, and then what you get is an amended bill, and then it reads like any other. So I wanted just to point that out. So I know that was going to go over most people's heads, because what is he talking about? The takeaway is the amendment process makes it much harder to follow legislation because it's not done in committee. And so you have less visibility to the amendments until they are actually adopted, if you will, unless somebody shares them with you. They're literally just brought to the floor, just like this, and then they're voted on, and they often vote either by voice vote or by standing as a committee. So you could have a bill, and they're allowed to do this, where they just change everything. It has nothing to do with the original bill, and boom, they do it like that. Now, the check, if you will, is it's got to go through both bodies. So if the Senate does that to a House bill, and we've seen it, and called a radiator cap, you take your car, you screw off the radiator, and you put it on another car. It's a totally different car. The only thing that's similar is the radiator cap. That's what they can do with the bill. So they can totally change it. But you think, wow, that's scary, except if they do that, then the other body has to concur, and then by that time, before the other body takes it up, then you'll know that it's been amended. So one body can act very quickly on that process, but then it gets slowed in the other body. So I want to just talk a bit about testifying. Raise your hand if you've testified here in this building? Not many. Raise your hand if you've ever testified, like at a city council, a county, just somewhere okay, so it's still not that many. All right, so here I'm going to put out 8 key points. In most cases, your testimony will be limited to 2 or 3 minutes. And the reason for that is if you have a lot of people show up, and everyone wanted to talk for 20 minutes, it would take a lot of time with 500 bills or hundreds of bills. So prepare. If you think, I'll just wing it, I mean, that's not a great strategy, and I'll explain why. But one of the reasons it's not a great strategy is you'll be amazed at how fast 2 minutes goes. I've seen so many people in the middle of a point, and the sort of the red light comes on, and they'll interrupt you, and they'll ask you. Sometimes if they see you're real close, they'll let you finish. So 2-3 minutes. There are bills that aren't important or not a lot of people that you can talk 4 or 5, but you won't know that. So you have to assume you only have 2 or 3 minutes. Always introduce yourself by name and who you're representing. So if you're just representing yourself, my name is John Doe, my name is Jane Doe, I'm here representing myself, and I live in Boise or I live in Meridian. So that's a requirement, actually, because it's going to go on the record. Always start, and this is something that many people get wrong, by recognizing the chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman or Madam Chair. Some people say Madam Chairman. I like to say Madam Chair. My name is Jane Doe. I represent myself, and I live in Meridian. And I'm here to testify in support or opposition to bill number, whatever the bill number is. That's what you want to start with. You want to say that, your name, whether you represent, and the representing yourself is important because, if you are, even if you're not paid, if you're with an organization, you do need to make that clear. Be clear about why you support or oppose something. Stick to the point, provide facts or tell a story, stick to the bill's topic. I've actually heard a lot of people testify, and after they're done, I'm like, were they for or against that? Because they kind of went off on a tangent. So, you start by saying that. Sometimes people forget to say they're for or against it because they're nervous. And then 2 minutes are up and you're like, well, were they for or against the bill? That doesn't happen that often. But if there's any doubt, you obviously didn't do a very convincing job, right? If someone's not sure if you're... when you're finished speaking, it's customary to say thank you and I'll stand for any questions. It's just a formal... And the reason you want to do that is 2 minutes is not a lot of time. And if you have an ally on the committee, they can actually give you an opportunity to make another point by asking you a question.
What
Yes.
about honorifics?
Honorifics.
Yeah. Do I have to say chairman or chairperson or
Oh.
council member or?
Oh, it's chairman. So when you
Public hearing, right?
yeah, but it's so the rules of this body. So if you're addressing the chairman or chairwoman, when you open your mouth, the first thing you say is Mr. Chairman or Madam Chair. And then if Senator or Representative Nate asks you, and I'm going to get to that, asks you a question, you say, Mr. Chairman, Representative Nate, I favor this because. And that just, there are many people who don't do that. It just looks more professional. So the honor, you always start when you address this group with Mr. Chairman or Madam Chair. And if the chairman's asking you a question, you don't need to say anything else. But if it's a representative or senator, then and the way to remember that is you're kind of looking at the chairman. So you just say, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rice, here's my answer. Mr. Chairman, Representative Nate, here's my answer. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, how many rules and procedures are there around if I use a last name and I say, right, like if I'm talking to somebody, I assume you do say names, but yeah, do you have to use certain titles?
Yes, yeah,
Are they
you
going
do.
to get after you?
Well, usually,
Douchebags like that,
well, there's that expectation. They know that the average person doesn't do this for a living and is not well practiced, so they're forgiving. If they feel you're doing it intentionally. So I've only seen one time a chairman get really, really angry. And it was a couple of times, but toward a citizen, not toward a lobbyist or something. And that was a doctor whose name I won't repeat and who's not a friend of liberty, accused the legislature of killing people for not, and the doctor actually said, you're killing people because you won't pass this Medicaid bill. And then that brought a very angry response. So if you're blatantly rude, it won't help your cause. So, the Idaho Freedom Foundation is seen as an organization that challenges a lot of stuff, but we try to be very respectful and polite. And I really encourage that, because why would you want to detract from the quality of your argument by not, and this is my opinion, by not saying Mr. Chairman or Senator so-and-so. Because I actually did see another person who was very angry, and he used very derogatory language toward a representative who wasn't that sympathetic, and she got a lot of sympathy. And he said, "You wouldn't be welcome in my elk camp," because it was a hunting issue. And everyone's like, "Whoa!" And so that really hurt that person's credibility because of the rudeness. So that's just my view, is never go out of your way to be rude. You can be stern, forceful, but be respectful, polite, follow the process. If you're testifying in person, be sure to show up at least 15 minutes ahead of the schedule of the hearing, or 30 if it's a busy. So why am I saying this? If it's an emotional thing, like maybe the vaccines, there might be 50 people outside the door. And if you're 50th, you might not actually get a chance to speak because they'll just run out of time. And the other thing is, it's kind of nice sometimes to go first, and then you can kind of sit back. And there are advantages to the small hearing, and there's only 5 people. You want to be the 5th, right? Because then you can clean up. But how do you know that? So you want to get here early. You don't have to be here. It's not like a rock concert. You don't need to be 6 hours early, but 15 minutes before is generally sufficient. 30 is better. So Kaitlyn pointed out that website that had the blue banner, and there's a lot of information on how to do remote testimony, and that's become a thing with COVID. And actually, it's been facilitated in the sense that it's easy if you live here, but if you got to drive 4 hours. So now that is an option. I think it's a good one. Personally, if I live here, I'd rather show up because the sound quality is not always great. And you just sometimes, with Zoom or whatever they're using, you can't hear the person, or it just doesn't have a great connection. So it's always better to show up. Any questions about testimony? I see one.
I'm not really sure if it's about testimony, but when you.
About anything.
When you mentioned about how, when there's 1,000 people that have called to give a complaint to something, how do you know that they actually got 1,000 complaints?
So the question is, if a lot of people email or call a legislator, how do you really know that? And the answer is you really don't. I'll tell you a funny story, though. Maybe it isn't funny. The pro tem, Senator Winder, actually, so he said this publicly, so I don't mind repeating it. That was one of his complaints about the Freedom Foundation, is that we'd reached out on some legislation, and all these people were calling their legislators, implying that was a bad thing. And so you'll hear about it often because that it doesn't happen as often as you think. Again, there are 500 to 600 bills introduced, and 90+% of them nobody's heard about, and they just don't. Now, I want to say one other thing. Dustin needs to cover the Freedom Index and the Spending Index. I want to give him the time to do that. And of course, those are resources we offer. We've talked about bills here as in laws and rules, but the legislature in a typical year, COVID has made it ridiculous because there's billions of federal money flowing in. They appropriate $9 to $10 billion, which of course is much less than Congress appropriates. That's what the federal government spends in hours or something. But it is a big deal. And those bills, there is no testimony taken on purely spending bills. So I don't mean a bill that would increase spending, which say education bill. I'm talking about the budget bill. The budget committee's rules are, they have a review process. You're welcome to listen to it. It's on the 3rd floor, but you can't say, hey, I don't think you should even support public television. You'd have to contact your legislators. So that process is they send those bills to the floor, and all those budget bills, the 100 or so budget bills, they get voted on. And there are some of them are very big. So your college and universities, all of the 4 major ones, one bill, $600 million, federal money, state money. Here it is, one fiscal note, and it's not super detailed. And it doesn't, there's no line item that says we're spending this much on critical race theory, this much on diversity. It's very, very high level general. Here's what the base is. Here are the things we're adding. It would never pass muster, if you were running a business to get, like someone just said, well, here's our annual sales. This is the budget. You're like, well, wait a minute, what are the expenses? What is this? What is that? You have to do your own. I do a lot of that, and it's a lot of work to do the research on the budget bill. So that whole process is very opaque. Yes.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
I write legislators by mail, snail mail, because they get hundreds of emails, and probably half of them are really nasty, vitriolic, and profane from the other side. But when they go to their post office box or their house, and they get the snail mail, they open up the letter, and it's rare that someone will, up on the other side, write a nasty letter and mail it. It's usually done email because it's easy for those people, and they have fake email addresses too. And not only that, I wrote Chuck Winder when he bashed the IFF, and so I saw him at a committee meeting over here at the courthouse the next couple of weeks later, and kind of smiled. So I just said, you know what? They're not the worst people in the world, you know. And I just was stating my opinion, and then he goes, I stated my opinion too. So my point is, snail mail always works better than email. Talking about for that.
Yep. That is it. They are impactful. I think I'm going to do one more question and then over to Dustin.
My question was along the same line. If I wrote however many legislators there are, if I wrote each one a letter and brought it down so it would be deposited in their legislative mailbox, since they're going to be here, do you think they would get it or read it?
So on the third floor of on each side of the rotunda, there's a House and Senate, I guess sergeant at arms or clerk, someone that sits at the desk. They're generally in a suit or at least a jacket. And if you write something and you put your name and address on it and ask them, and we've done that, we have to put our organization name, address. They will, I can't guarantee it, but they'll tell you whether they'll do it. I guess if they say, well, I won't do this, I mean, you could ask why. But you could not only avoid the stamp, but if you wanted to get something to 35 senators or 70 House members without mailing that many, that would be an option. Generally, that's used by organizations. I don't know that it can't be used by people. Again, you absolutely have to put your name, address, maybe even a phone number, and then if it's a letter, write that. If you don't do that, I know if you don't have the name and address, they will not deposit it. And that is actually potentially an option as a citizen. Then you could take 70 and they get it in their box. I will say one last thing. So we have a citizen legislature. They don't have the huge staff like they do in DC, although I'd argue that the huge staff hasn't really produced a whole lot of good stuff in DC anyway. But do be mindful of the fact that they have to read that for themselves. And by mid-February, they're inundated with information. So you really want to be brief. So I typically want to provide something that's 1, maybe 2 pages. If you're going to here's a book, please read that. Okay, it's going in the pile. And I think that's true of all of us. We'll all read a page or 2, but if you ask someone, you give them 2 pages on healthcare policy, they'll read it. If you give them a 300-page book, how many of us would read that? Or start it maybe, we put it in the nightstand and we never pick it up again. So be always to the point, and in some ways that takes more work to be brief because you really got to boil it down to the essential points. Anything else? I see one more. I'll just do one more, and that's it. One more.
During the time that they are in legislation, what are they allowed to, or is it okay to be sending them letters about stuff that's upcoming that they talked about, or something you'd like to get going, or, I mean, during the rest of the year, they're campaigning or things this, that, and the other, so wouldn't, I mean, if you brought mail.
So, okay, so contacting legislators in session, out of session. So there's the website and their email, some of them won't respond out of session. They'll have a bounce back that says we're not in session. I'll get back to you when I can. But typically out of session email or you don't want to call their office phone here. Some of them have their own phone. They'll put it on the website. Some won't. Some won't appreciate it. But if they put the phone number, then it's fair game, I suppose, if they put it out. But if you have their phone number, yes, you can. I mean, you can call them or mail them or email them off session. I mean, during the session, obviously, you can try to get a meeting with them by coming here and talking to their appointments person. Okay, Dustin, you're up.
Let's give Fred a hand. It's always tough following Fred. He knows, like I said, he knows everything about the state government. It's really cool. Just very briefly, I want to just kind of go over the Idaho Freedom Index, which is Chuck Winder's least favorite thing in the entire world. Yeah. By the way, I was going to say, he has his opinion, but it's wrong too. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So the Idaho Freedom Index is our legislative scorecard that we primarily use it to educate the public and to educate lawmakers about the effects of legislation. And then lawmakers just happen to earn a score that shows if they like government or not. So you'll locate this either by going to idahofreedom.org, which is our main website. And there's a banner there that you can get there, or there's a little word or phrase, Freedom Index, in the top bar, or you can go directly to idahofreedomindex.com, and that's the best way to get there. Starting off at the top of the page, it's simple. Just there's a title, and then you can enter your address if you don't know your state lawmaker. Now, I will say that redistricting is happening right now, and a lot of people are worried about that and curious how that's going to affect them. That doesn't go into effect for this next legislative session. So your lawmakers that are your lawmakers today will still be your lawmakers in the next legislative session. And then we will rebuild the Freedom Index for the next term, so 2023 or whatever it is. So you can go ahead and enter your address and bring up your lawmakers. If you'll scroll down just a little bit, Josh. There are a lot of really cool tools here, so stop there. The filtering is really fun. So again, if you want to sort by, so go to sort by. You can look at alphabetical, high, low, et cetera, by score, by district, et cetera. Go down to, let's just click out of that box if you would. Go to district. Let's go to district 20 just for fun. No reason in particular to choose that district. There's an odd man out there. I wonder why he doesn't like us. So you can look at your district and kind of get the overview there. Then you can go by, so scroll out of there, or Josh, go back up to all districts. You can go by party. So you can see only Republicans. You can see only Democrats, no party, although we don't have any. And then you can go by body. So Senate or House. So there's that. Notice that the top six doesn't change because when you go to the Senate or the House, because there's nobody in the Senate that's really that good except for Christie and Regina. But anyway, so let's scroll down a little bit more. So there are helpful links over on the right side. So every year we put out, at the end of the session, we put out our official publication that has all the scores. You can download that and print it off for yourself. Below that, the rating metric is there, and that's actually included in the packet that we prepared for you. You can see the questions that we ask about every single piece of legislation that comes through. Somebody asked earlier, hey, when does the constitutional review happen for these bills? It happens every day at IFF, quite frankly, because we want to make sure that bills are constitutional. So we do that. Some of them do that, but we make sure that happens. So that's actually contained in the metric there. Then there's, if you like math, I don't, but if you like math, you can go look at how we actually calculate the scores. We want to be fully transparent. We're not picking on anybody. Everybody goes through the same process. You can go through that. We're not going to do that here. And then to see the data here, there's a back-end spreadsheet, a table that has all of this data contained in there, and it gives you kind of a picture on all the votes, yes or no, if you like tables and data and stuff like that. That's the place to get that. Super ugly, but it's very functional if you want to do a little bit more deep dives into a piece of legislation. Then you can meet the analysts. So we do that because sometimes legislators or community members will have questions about bills or will challenge us on something that maybe we got wrong. And so we want to be able to have those conversations that are important because we're not perfect. We're human just like everybody else. sometimes we miss stuff. It's rare, but sometimes we do. And then just a little explainer about the Freedom Index. And then if you want to go back and do previous index years, you can go back and look at that. Then if you'll scroll down a little bit more, Josh. All the bills that we rate are there. Every single bill. I believe this year was 230 bills that we rated, or 270. I don't remember. I think it was 230. Anyway, they're categorized by body, and then they go by number. So one obviously is at the bottom, and then the higher numbers are at the top. I think Senate is at the top too. So there's that. So if you want to go look at a particular bill, that's where you'd find that from us. So if you'll click on voting record, Josh, just of one of the lawmakers. Okay, scroll up to the top. So this is the record for Greg Furch. So you can kind of see which bill, and it starts with 1, and then you can see which bill, you can see his vote, and that gives you a more in-depth picture. Now, there is a problem with this page that it only shows 100 of his bills that he's voted on, and then it takes you to our vendors page. We're rebuilding that because it's kind of annoying. So that's going to be changed very, very soon. But that's the way that you look to see how your legislator voted on a certain piece of legislation. So that's the Idaho Freedom Index in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot of working parts and pieces. But that's that. So, and to be clear, the lawmakers, we don't grade, this is an important distinction. We don't grade lawmakers. If we did, some of them would get negative scores, quite frankly. But lawmakers earn their scores. We make sure that the bills are rated before each floor hearing. So, and we work really hard to do that. Sometimes Parrish and Fred are up at all hours of the night getting legislation rated. But we make sure that the ratings are up and that the lawmakers can review the ratings and the analyses before the votes. And then they earn their scores. We don't assign them scores because we think they're bad people. They get their scores. Just want to make sure that's clear. If you'll switch over to the other tab, the other product that we have there is the Idaho Spending Index. Now this one's not quite as cute because we haven't rebuilt this one yet. That's coming. But basically this one shows if your lawmakers are big spenders or not. We realized a couple years ago that many people were claiming to be conservative lawmakers, but spending like AOC, right? It just, it was a huge problem. And Fred has done a great job putting this together. He goes to, again, I wish I could hug the guy. He doesn't like hugs. But he goes to all the JFAC meetings, including the ones that start at 7 o'clock in the morning, and he listens to all the testimony. He evaluates all the budget bills. And some of them are, how do I explain this? Basically, he determines if the spending growth is okay, if it's too much, if it's objectionable, it's for objectionable purposes, and we can go into that a little bit more. But basically, the people at the top of this metric as it sits right now, those are the people who are the most conservative, who are frugal, who are reviewing budgets, who are meticulous, and vote the right way when it comes to budget bills. The people at the bottom are the big spenders, and typically it's the people who are on the budget committee who are at the bottom because they support the committee and its decisions. So these are the folks that, seriously, some of them have zero grades on this. They're the biggest spenders. Notice that a Republican is at the bottom, so labels don't always mean everything. If you'll scroll down, Josh, on this one. Maybe. So you'll see, again, this is a different format than we use on the other page, but those are all the bills that Fred rated in the 2021 session. And you can go and look at those. They're fantastic ratings, and there's a lot of work that's put into those. And I know as I review the metrics and the analytics on our website, I know lawmakers view them and they rely on them a lot because, again, we're a valuable resource, and lawmakers don't have staff. They don't have the time to do the digging that we do, and it's a great resource. So you can go and dig into those if you'd like. Scroll down a little bit further. So many bills. And then, again, at the bottom, you can see there's our metric that we use for this one, which is included in your packet. That Fred uses to rate bills, and then you can go look at the previous years. So those are the two indexes that we run. And I want to close today by giving you guys a couple nuggets and some presents, if you will. So we have the Idaho Freedom Index that is being rebuilt, completely revamped right now, so that you can see the leaderboard is more interactive. You will be able to compare lawmakers, and then you'll be able to email lawmakers straight from the page. And we've got a whole bunch of other features that we're excited to roll out that should be available by December 1. So I hope you'll take some time to familiarize yourself with that new index. We are rebuilding the spending index so that it will look like the Freedom Index and it will be way more functional to use. And then this is one that I'm really excited about. We have at the Idaho Freedom Foundation have zeroed in on education, because that's kind of ground zero for our culture war fight, right? If we indoctrinate our kids, if we let them think that socialism is good or that Marxism is desirable, we're going to lose our free society. So we are going to be rolling out the Idaho Education Index here in a few weeks. And that is going to ultimately point us toward a system with less government or no government interference in the education system, so that families can be free to educate their kids as they see fit. So be watching out for that as well. So any questions about any of our indexes?
When are you going to add the index that evaluates or allows citizens to evaluate where campaign funding is?
It's already up there.
Yeah, that's already available at the website is terrible. Admittedly, the Secretary of State's website is terrible. What we're told is that they are rebuilding it because they realize that it's terrible. So hopefully government will get it right this time. We'll see. But yes, you should familiarize yourself with the Secretary of State's website. Maybe we'll do that in Legislature 201. I don't know.
Thank you very much. Have you seen legislators use this and see what their score is and adjust it?
You know, I had to build a nondescript page for a couple of lawmakers, senators to use, because they were pulling up the Freedom Index in the Senate and they were getting crap for it. No joke. They were getting harassed by their colleagues because they were using the Freedom Index in the on the Senate floor to review legislation. And again, from watching traffic, I know who's using it and where it's being used, and absolutely lawmakers do pay attention.
Have you ever seen them go from, a poor score to realizing that they weren't aligned?
Yes, absolutely. It usually goes the other way, unfortunately. when somebody gets in leadership or gets a committee chairmanship, they usually go down, but it does happen. My favorite story, oh my gosh. If you guys remember John Rushi, anybody remember John Rushi? He was the House Minority Leader for a long time. He hated the index probably as much as Chuck Winder does. But he hated the index and he would constantly berate it in the news media and on his social media and stuff like that. And then came the 2016 election. And all of a sudden, the winds were shifting and his district was going conservative. So all of a sudden, he put out a flyer that said, John Rushi is the most conservative Democrat on the Idaho Freedom Index. It was fantastic. We actually put out a cartoon. It was amazing. I've most fun I've ever had doing this stuff. We put out a cartoon of John Rushi, and I'll post it on Facebook later or something. And he's holding up his report card, and there's a big F, and then you can see that he's added like an A to it, or another leg to make it an A. It was fantastic. It was, yeah. So the Freedom Index is a thing, and the cool thing about that is you've seen a lot of people try to imitate it, and nobody can get it right because we put a huge investment of time. We've got Fred and Parrish and Kaitlyn and Anna working on it. Nobody can match what we do. And again, that's a big thanks. We owe a lot of that to our supporters and donors because nobody else across the nation does this as well as we do. So,
since you are officially like lobbyists.
Yes. Don't hate me.
Well, no, I was going to ask for people that are new to the legislature, how appropriate is it for them to talk with you and find out where you guys stand on certain bills? Do
you mean a member of the legislature?
Yeah.
It's absolutely appropriate. I mean, you think about the medical industry has lobbyists, big tech has lobbyists, pharma definitely has lobbyists, right? We're Freedom's lobbyists. We lobby for you guys. We lobby for your pocketbook to make sure that that while you're out there making a living, that they're not in there in your back pocket stealing your living. So we absolutely, and we follow the law. We report everything. Fred makes sure that everything gets reported down to the nickel because we believe in that transparency.
So then they can use you as a resource.
All the time. So, yeah. How do you join? Well, first, you got to give me a hug. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just lonely today. There are a couple things that you can do. Number one, join our email list. That's our main vehicle for getting the message out to people. IdahoFreedom.org, and as you saw on some of the web pages, you'll get a pop-up box, or you just go to IdahoFreedom.org/email. If you want to make a donation, I won't stop you. There's IdahoFreedom.org, top right. There's a box that says donate, and any little bit helps. I mean, people think, hey, $5, that's not great. No, it is great, because for $5, that's like 500 text messages to districts, or that's, one story boosted, or that's a Freedom Index analysis. So we'd love to have you as a supporter. And it's like I said, our supporters allow us to do what we do every day and do it really, really well. So yeah, we'd love to have you.
Just want to give some kudos to you, because if you go and look at the American Conservative Union rating, we'll also rate our legislators.
Mm-hmm.
If they're low on your list, they're pretty low.
Yeah, Fred's done the analysis on that, and it's not a perfect agreement, because we have different priorities, and we actually take a bigger look at things. They only rate, maybe 10, 15 bills, but it is very, very similar, and that's very helpful, because, we're not an aberration, we're not an anomaly. So yeah, absolutely, and rely on that one too. The ACU scorecard is good, ours is better, but yeah.
And does it do any good to express your concerns to your local, like Republican precinct chair, or your Republican county central committee? Because that's where your candidates are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the biggest negative of our whole party system, is certain people get in control of whether it's Democrat or Republican, get control of the parties, and the parties filter out the candidates a lot of the time. So does it, or even just a state bill or something, does it do any good to contact your precinct?
It can't hurt. It can't hurt. I mean, when I think about activism, I think about all the tools in the toolbox, whether it's contacting your lawmakers, talking to your local party officials, writing letters to the editor. It can't hurt, unless you're really bad at it, I suppose. But if you're bad at it, don't do it. But I would absolutely weigh in that way. Yeah.
Does your website show when you post the bills, does it have your analysis on there as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And Josh, if you'll go back to the spending or the Freedom Index, right click on just one of those bills and open up a new tab, or pull that up. Yeah, we make this available. So you can see the bill description, which we pull straight from Bill Track from the website. You can see the rating and then our explanation, so that we're not hiding our rating. We're not saying this is bad and you have to guess why, and we'll tell you later. That'll determine your score. Some people accuse us of doing that, but it's all right here. Everything is up front and above board on the Freedom Index. So yes. Next question.
I want to know how many people you have on staff.
Not enough.
Thank you for doing this, and for all the amazing
Thank you.
literature and information you guys put out to us constantly. I really appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. Thank you. We do have, how many, Allie, how many do we have on staff? Is it 5? Is it 5? 5. Yeah. We'll have 7, and we're hoping to hire maybe one more. So, but it's never enough. And we use a lot of contractors. Josh here is a contractor who does our video stuff. He's really good. And we also use volunteers. We're doing a mailing next week, if any of you want to volunteer. And we were appreciative of that, because again, it's whether it's donations or time at IFF helping us stuff envelopes or whatever, we can't do what we do without our supporters. Any other?
I just want to echo what she said. I think this is genius, and I'll be donating.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. The team came up with this actually as a result of the silver lining of coronavirus. so many people were asleep before coronavirus, honestly. And I think sometimes it's worse in a Republican state because everyone says, the conservatives might say, oh, well, my lawmakers are Republican. They're part of my tribe. I trust them to do the right thing. Have you seen Chuck Winder's score? Right? So labels aren't always accurate. And so we decided, a lot of people, again, during coronavirus, they said, hey, I didn't know government could do this, this, and this. How do I get involved? And I realized, like, I've been in this for 10 years. Like, it just came second nature to me. Not everybody knew all of this. And so that's how we birthed the idea of Legislature 101. And we're going to keep doing it because I was thinking about it driving over here this morning. You know, the people, the professionals in this hall, they know all the ins and outs. They have the relationships. They know how to score their crony deals. It's time to level the playing field, and this is how we do it. All right, any other questions? Lynn? Hi.
Thanks very much, this is really great. Can you just lightly, briefly talk about what's gonna happen on Monday?
Oh, gosh.
I'm still confused.
We're all confused.
It says there's like 25 or 30 RSs.
Yep.
So, but then the Senate will not hear any of them, so what happens?
Well, hang on, we don't know that yet. So let's briefly go over Monday, and then we'll wrap up, and then we'll do tours, and we can talk afterwards. And Fred's here because he knows I'm going to screw this up. No, so we'll do this together. Oh, he's even stealing the mic. So
Well, you're bigger than me. I
yeah.
can't.
So 7:30 a.m. on Monday morning, I will be dragging my bum out of bed to be in the House Ways and Means Committee meeting where they will start this process. They'll introduce or at least consider introduction of all those RSs on that agenda that's floating around. Now, interestingly enough, the committee meeting could last 1 minute. They could say, Mr. Chairman, I move to introduce RS whatever through whatever and just do it all in one fell swoop, or they could go individually. Then they will be read across the desk in the House, and then they'll go through that process. Now, after they're read across the desk, they will be assigned to the germane committees. So a business bill will go to the Business Committee, a Health and Welfare bill will go to the Health and Welfare Committee. At that point, it's up to the chairman to decide if the bills get a hearing. And my guess is, if I understand the culture of this building, a lot of them will be drawn immediately. So that's why, again, we're doing this, and that's why we've made preparations to call, to rally people, to get emails flowing, because there's going to be a lot of confusion. There are a couple really good bills that we're watching, and there's one in particular that we really want to see passed. Will it pass? I don't know, but we're going to do our best to get it. So then after that, it depends. Committee hearings, and then it goes through the process. And then after it goes to the House, if bills make it through the House, then they'll go to the Senate, where they will probably be drawn, quite frankly, but we don't know that.
We don't know that.
Fred's very accurate about things. And then the Senate will also consider its own bills and send them over. So there'll be a lot of crossover between the two bodies.
So we know now that there are about 4 Senate bills dealing with vaccines, 29 House bills. We haven't seen the bills because, as we mentioned earlier, they're the property of the legislators' RSs. Some of them have shared them, some haven't. So if you went on the website, you could see a one-sentence description of the bill, the way they want to put it, but that doesn't really tell you. A lot of them look like they overlap. So I think it'll be a very hectic, confusing process, because you think of 33 pieces of legislation dealing with a very emotional topic, all coming forward, or some of them not, and that's why it's a very unusual situation.
So what do you recommend for those of us who are very interested in the outcome of this? Is it best to be here at 7:30?
No. No. Here's what I would do. Shameless plug. We have a text group that we use to keep people up to date. So I would text the word index to 208. Do you want to grab a pen? 208-514-4480. Again, that's index to 208-514-4480. We will, and I try not to spam people. I really don't like doing that. But throughout the day on Monday, I will be sending out updates on what's happening so that our followers know exactly what's going on. We'll be doing videos on Facebook. We'll be putting out Freedom Index ratings as fast as we can do them so that everybody is aware and up to speed on what's going and all the moving parts and pieces. So just plug in, honestly, plug in is what you need to do. Follow your favorite lawmakers on Facebook and text them, email them, just say, hey, give me updates or whatever. But definitely join our text group, follow us on Facebook. And 208-514-4480. And I'll send you cat pictures too when we're all done with this session. Okay, a couple more questions, then we really got to wrap up.
Is there a way for us to find out if something has been put into the box
Yeah.
and shelf?
Not
Well, I mean,
really.
The way, as Kaitlyn was talking about the journal and the minutes. So if a bill if they're on the agenda, now sometimes things never make it to an agenda, right? Then you wouldn't know. But the agenda is on the website. So if you see these 29 bills and then the next day, maybe it's Monday afternoon, maybe it's Tuesday morning, you see of the 29, I'm just going to pick a number, just a guess. Let's say 24 are on agendas. Well, by the process of elimination, those 5 were put in a drawer, right? Because they were assigned to a committee and the chairman decided not to put them on an agenda. So were there bills outside the 29 that didn't even make the cut? Possibly, but 29 is a lot. So there are 29 RSs, and it's possible some won't be introduced for technicality or something. So those 29 RSs, if you don't see bills, then they didn't even make it out of Ways and Means. If you see bill numbers, but they don't get on a committee agenda, then they're not getting a hearing, and then they were put in a drawer, so to speak. So but they won't. There's no list of bills put in drawers. Dustin's right about that. But
That'd be cool, though.
You can figure it out if you start from the beginning and follow it. Yes.
Which committee for Monday, so for activism purposes, which committee chairs are the most critical that we email, and what's the most critical ask of them?
We don't know. That's the problem. So again, the House Ways and Means Committee is just kind of a catch-all committee used to introduce legislation very quickly. It's after that, after the first reading, that bills will be assigned. My guess is you will see bills in health and welfare, business, state affairs, and education. That would be my guess. Any others? Maybe commerce? But commerce.
Could be commerce.
That's a
maybe
worthless committee.
Student rules.
Maybe, yeah, probably student rules. So you
Judiciary
could see 5 committees get bills in the House and 3 or 4 in the Senate.
The Senate will be fewer.
The ask, depending on the piece of legislation, it really depends on the piece of legislation. You could say this bill is terrible, kill it, or it could be this bill needs to be heard, or this bill needs to be passed. So again, it's just paying attention to the process and the piece of legislation. Back in the back.
Do you know if there are any legislative efforts in the direction of election reform?
Yes, there are, and that will be covered next session. There are people working on that. Yep. Okay, like 3 more questions.
Who decides on who will be on each committee?
Leadership.
But that's before tomorrow. That's done after an election.
Right after the election, they do an organizational session. And in the House, it's completely up to leadership. In the Senate, it's by seniority.
Leadership.
And leadership, but the most senior senators get better assignments and stuff like that. But there's politics and all that. You know that.
Does the IFF ever get involved with lawsuits? Meaning Senate Bill 1110 was passed and those liberals took it to court. And I didn't see much GOP fighting in the court. Obviously, I didn't go to the trial, but in California since 1980, there was 469 initiatives, okay?
Right.
And Democrats like that 50% plus 1. Does the IFF get involved with legal issues?
So we have had in the past a center, a legal defense fund. Litigation is very expensive, and we do have an attorney on our staff, but we haven't always had an attorney. And then of course you need someone who specializes in whatever. So the short answer is we were, we weren't the lawyers, but we certainly supported the lawsuit to throw out the governor's late veto of the grocery tax. But the short answer is that's not sort of the bread and butter of what we do. I mean, certainly we can offer opinions, but litigation work's expensive. And just speaking of which, so the initiative bill that passed, and then there was the lawsuit, and then of course Reclaim Idaho won, the state lost, and then the Supreme Court actually awarded legal fees, and it was, I don't know, 170, it was a lot of money, 100 and some $1,000. So we don't want to be in a position of writing a check to a leftist group because they won a lawsuit. So it's not something we're against doing, it's just not something that we take the lead on typically.
Okay. Seriously, 2 more questions. I love this, but I got kids to get home to.
Why should we not show up on Monday? And what RS are you supporting?
I would say do show up on Monday. Just don't show up at 7:30 because that meeting is not. There's nothing going to be decided. That's, how do I say this?
You can't really influence.
Yeah, you can't influence that committee. I don't know that they won't take public testimony. So your presence there is probably unnecessary. It's, again, after the first reading, when the bills are assigned, that's when to act. That's when to show up. That's when to make calls. That's when to make emails. As far as the RS that we're supporting, we aren't necessarily, well, how do I say that?
Well, I mean, here's and this is the straight scoop. It's hard to make a blanket statement because we haven't seen most of them. We've seen a few of them, and I want to be because this is actually a good opportunity, very to the point. So it seems like a very simple issue. Your medical decisions should be your own. I think most of us agree on that. The federal government, I mean, taking medical advice from Joe Biden, I mean, that's like a stand-up comedy routine, right? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense that the president would have that sort of decision-making authority for 330 million people with unique needs. That's the simple part. Here's the hard part. The federal government is restricted, has said federal employees need to get it. It has said employees of federal contractors need to get it. It has said hospitals that receive federal money like Medicare and Medicaid, that those employees need to get the vaccine. And then everyone's heard about this if you have a company with more than 100 people. Everything the federal government is trying, there is some level of pushback. The Fifth Circuit Court in Texas has stayed the vaccine mandate. There are other lawsuits. There's a lot going on. Our viewpoint is we being the people of Idaho and their legislators, should address what's happening to Idahoans, meaning what's being done to them. They're losing their jobs here outside of any the Biden OSHA mandate, because that's actually on hold. Companies on their own volition have said, well, if you don't, vaccinate or terminate. So what we're trying to do is identify what bill best does that, not just passing something to shake our fists at Joe Biden. A lot of people are doing that. I read a whole page on emails of all these very smart legal people saying OSHA doesn't have the power to do this and this. That's already in the courts. Why would we want to take that on? I mean, we could throw an amicus brief in there, but we don't need to initiate that. The Fifth Circuit Court has already said, no, Biden, you can't do this. And there's a dozen people involved in that. So our viewpoint is what legislation makes the most sense in Idaho to protect Idahoans from being terminated because they've made a medical decision. That's what we're after.
As far as specific legislation, here's what I would tell you. We have a process here at IFF. We have the Freedom Index. And like I said, as soon as we get legislation, as soon as we see public copies, they'll be rated on our website. I have to reset the Freedom Index on Monday. So pay attention to IdahoFreedomIndex.com, and we'll go through every point for every bill that we think will receive a public hearing. And that's the best way to guide that. Last question. There was one more. Is there anybody else? Last question.
So just to verify, you don't need any more bodies to be quiet in hearings and just see what's going on so that everything's tomorrow?
I would say if you're interested, if you're passionate about it, come. But again, you don't need to be here at 7:30 on Monday morning. I'll do that. You come later. Okay. Just stay tuned. I can't tell you anything right now. Just
9 o'clock probably that's when they officially convene.
yeah, they'll start the floor sessions at 9 o'clock, House and Senate. So you could be there, and it's fun to watch sometimes. Where do you go? So if you want to come on the tour, that's a nice plug. Come on the tour after. I'll take you up to where you would go. But if you want to go to the different bill hearings in the afternoon, which is when we think they will happen, pay attention to the assigned committee and then go find that committee room. But the floor hearings take place upstairs. So with that, again, a couple things that just to wrap things up. First of all, thank you again for being here. I know Saturday is a day that I'd rather be watching football, but this is really important stuff. And I think you all realize that. So thank you for being here. Thank you to Fred, Kaitlyn, Allie, and Josh, and our photographer, Daniel. Thank you so much for making this happen. We appreciate you guys. Two cool things that are coming up. We're doing another session of Legislature 101 for people who can't travel the state. It's December 9th. It's a Thursday night at 7 o'clock. We'll be sending out plenty of emails and stuff like that. So be sure to share that with your friends. And if you wanted to take a quick Capitol tour, Allie and I will be doing that immediately following this. We'll probably give it about 5 minutes so I can get a drink of water and some fresh air. And then we'll do a quick Capitol tour for anybody who wants to do it. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you.